What do you picture when you think of black women in television or movies? Is she strong, sassy, intelligent, an independent woman, a sidekick to the main character? And what is her complexion like? The portrayal of black people in media has a checkered past to say the least, but the portrayal of black women in particular is definitely worth examining. Now, I promise that this video is not clickbait, but the direction that this video takes may surprise you. I specifically chose Janet Hubert Witten and Daphne Reed for the thumbnail because it almost is universally agreed upon by fans of The Fresh Prince that Janet was by far the superior actress to portray Aunt Viv between the two of them. For the uninitiated, Janet portrayed Aunt Viv from seasons 1 through 3 and after a contract dispute was replaced by Daphne for the rest of the show's run. The replacement was awkward and the show even cheekily acknowledged as much with a brief fourth wall break. Despite the replacement, fans tend to agree that Janet was the better actress and brought more personality and flair to the role, whereas Daphne's portrayal, while not terrible by any means, is seen as relatively subdued and drab in comparison. Because of this, Janet has a dedicated faction of Fresh Prince fans that affectionately refer to her as dark-skinned Aunt Viv. However, neither Janet, Daphne, or their shared character Aunt Viv is the topic of discussion for this video. At least, not really. I led with Janet and her famous portrayal of Aunt Viv because she was an outlier. Aunt Viv was a highly intelligent, no-nonsense matriarch, and much of that had to do with Janet's on-screen portrayal. Importantly though, regardless of her on-screen talent, Aunt Viv was never written in a negative or stereotypical manner. And this is where we get to the meat and potatoes of this video. Colorism in Hollywood is not exactly groundbreaking news, and I'm certainly not the first person to opine about it. But the role of Aunt Viv itself was a gem of a role, and in spite of Janet's talent, the fact that she ever got the role at all was the exception and not the rule. The fact that she would go on to lose that role to a much lighter skinned counterpart is truly a bitter irony that almost solidifies the point further. Famous and wealthy YouTube video essayist FD Signifier did a great video about black men and colorism on screen, making the point that light-skinned men seem to be underrepresented in that regard. And when they are represented, they are typically relegated to fairly niche roles. And there is very much a mirror effect for dark-skinned women in Hollywood. Not only are dark-skinned women less likely to receive prominent TV and movie roles than their lighter-skinned counterparts, the roles they do receive tend to lean heavily into negative stereotypes about black women or are supporting roles where the character literally only exists to prop up another character and have no personality or motivations of their own. Martin, a personal favorite sitcom of mine, is a perfect example of the former. Martin's love interest, Gina, is portrayed as beautiful, strong, funny, and talented, and is of course played by the very light-skinned Tisha Campbell. Martin's antagonist of sorts, and the far more aggressive Pam, is played by the dark-skinned Tashina Arnold. Adding to this is the fact that Pam is often the butt of many of Martin's jokes and ridicule. Sure, the argument can be made that Pam dishes it out to Martin as much as she takes it, but it's clear that Pam is largely defending herself from Martin's verbal belittlings. To be fair, there is a degree of a sibling-like relationship and rivalry between the two, but that does not negate the very valid observation that Pam is almost never portrayed as soft or feminine throughout the show's run. This is not to imply that the character of Pam was entirely negative, but she was unquestionably the on-screen personification of a brash, angry black woman stereotype, an observation I am not the first to make by any means. Again, Pam was not a one-note character with no depth, and Tashina did an absolutely amazing job with what she was given to work with. But any depth that Pam did have came secondary to her stereotypical traits. Aside from the roles that dark-skinned black women were getting, it is key to look at the roles they were not getting. Most iconic black TV shows are played by a dark or darker-skinned black man and a very light-skinned woman. Perhaps a classic example of this is Bill and Claire Huxtable, played by Bill Cosby and Felicia Rashad, the well-to-do doctor and lawyer upper-middle-class couple that exemplified so-called black excellence. Claire was smart, capable, reasonable, and a loving mother. She has a few moments, but is very rarely portrayed in a negative light throughout the series. Looking at a spin-off of The Cosby Show, A Different World, the leads, Dwayne and Whitley, are played by the dark-skinned Kadeem Hardison and light-skinned Jasmine Guy. Both The Cosby Show and A Different World are staples in black culture for different reasons. The Cosby Show is seen as normalizing black excellence and success, and A Different World is potentially responsible for encouraging many Gen X black youth into attending an HBCU. To be clear, both Jasmine Guy and Felicia Rashad are talented actresses, and in no way is a point being made about them. Why would they not take full advantage of any opportunities they received? But the point is rather about the opportunity that actresses like that receive in the first place. Casting in Hollywood is a microcosm of the larger unfortunate reality that stereotypes, even when wholly untrue, can lead to real-life consequences. Dark-skinned black women are haunted with the masculine, aggressive, and angry stereotype, while lighter-skinned women are seen as soft, feminine, intelligent, and worthy of being cared for. And if one needs additional evidence of how these are forced stereotypes that are used to determine how people are treated, one need only look at the angry Latina stereotype. Whilst also a stereotype and not necessarily an entirely positive one, the so-called angry Latina is viewed as feisty and desirable, whereas the angry black woman is viewed as loud, aggressive, and undesirable. And while much of this can be obviously traced back to white supremacy, as black people, we have internalized much of this anti-blackness to the point that even dark-skinned black people tend to view ourselves as less desirable than our lighter-skinned counterparts, whether consciously or subconsciously. And as far as casting choices regarding dark-skinned and light-skinned women, are these Hollywood choices merely a reflection of society at large? Or are they creating the standard that society then mimics? Well, seeing as television and movies do not predate our ugly racist history, I think it's fair to say that Hollywood is mirroring our society, or at least it was at one point. At some point, it likely became a vicious cycle or feedback loop, where one continuously feeds into the other. People see how dark-skinned black women are represented in the media and expect to find the same in reality. If they ever encounter a single person that even remotely fits the stereotype they've seen, it quickly becomes solidified, even if they get countless examples to the contrary. None of this is to make the claim that dark-skinned actresses never get good roles, or that fans don't appreciate them. Yes and yes, those things do happen, but as stated before, it tends to be the exception and not the rule. Viola Davis has been rightfully praised as a truly elite thespian, and Lupita Nyong'o is both revered as a talented actress and a sex symbol. However, the reality remains that for black women, particularly darker-skinned black women, their humanity and grace is never truly acknowledged. Take Angela Bassett's reaction to losing an Oscar to Jamie Lee Curtis as a perfect example. Angela Bassett had the audacity to be mildly disappointed that she did not win an Oscar, and let's be real, she probably should have won, and it was practically headline news that she was slightly disappointed in not winning over Jamie Lee Curtis. There is a certain unspoken expectation that as a black woman, she should have been grateful to even be there, and her not expressing external joy on behalf of Jamie Lee Curtis was somehow disrespectful and worthy of discourse. Ridiculous. But to re-engage with the original point of colorism specifically, none of this is accidental. Colorism is obviously rooted in white supremacy because it represents proximity to whiteness. For black men, it is used to stereotype darker-skinned black men as aggressive, thuggish, and less trustworthy by default. And with women, darkness represents decreased femininity, unless, ironically, they are being fetishized. Dark-skinned black women are just not viewed as individual women by default in the same way white women or even lighter-skinned black women are. Assumptions are made based on existing stereotypes, and unlike with men, those assumptions are held against dark-skinned women no matter what they do. A perfect example of this is Barack and Michelle Obama. Despite being biracial, Barack is essentially referred to as a black man. And while Barack has certainly been on the receiving end of many racially charged attacks, it almost never has to do with his physical appearance. Michelle Obama, however, despite objectively being a gorgeous woman, has specifically been referred to by some of the most disgusting racist language that the human imagination can muster, based solely on the fact that she is a dark-skinned black woman. If this is how a distinguished, educated, and scandal-free First Lady was treated, then it is truly no surprise that we continue to see dark-skinned women being relegated to the back seat more often in Hollywood. This is also why some of the most talented actresses in Hollywood are dark-skinned, not because they are inherently better actresses, but because they have to be that much better than their colleagues to even be considered. But while it is easy to appreciate the elite dark-skinned actresses that are thriving in Hollywood and see them as an example of representation, it is important to allow our dark-skinned actresses to be pretty good as well. Without denigrating the talents of lighter-skinned actresses, many of them are just pretty good, but not necessarily outstanding. And that is fine. It takes all kinds, but the luxury needs to be extended to the chocolate thespians as well.
Black men get more opportunity than black women to become more of themselves, like Will Smith got to be a rapper and to act in sitcoms and then to save the world on Independence Day. They are allowed to think around him in a more imaginative way and expand his horizons. And yet with black women, we sort of go, you were good in that, and then that's it.
Alright guys, thank you so much for watching if you got to this point in the video. And I am considering making a video that's sort of a follow-up to this video, but not really. So just to kind of gauge the interest, if you can, just do me a favor and drop your favorite black sitcom in the comments. Whatever your black sitcom was from any era, just drop it in the comments, let me know. And again, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Patreon.com/ProgressiveWriter.